So we're going to assemble together a half grow house. So I've got the packages that the carrier would deliver in front of me. Now when the carrier delivers, the best thing to do first of all is just to make sure you've got the right number of packages and just visually check they all look okay. You don't have to undo all the boxes and check the contents inside. It's just a visual exterior check. So you've got the packs of glass, and you can put those to one side for the moment because you won't need those till later on in the construction process. We've then got this parts box. This has got all the small components in there, the nuts and bolts and the smaller rails, and that's also got the instruction book in there. So you'll want to open that first. And then we've got this pack, which is actually 3 packages strapped together. So we've got the shelf rods for the seed trays on there. We've got the longer rails for the construction of the grow house, and then at the back we've also got the back components as well. So there's 3 packages there all in one. So we just want to check they all look all right before we proceed with the assembly of the half grow house. Okay, so we've checked all of our parcels, and the first thing we want to do is open the parts box because that's got the instructions in there. So we open that up and we've got all the smaller components in here. Now I've taken all the protective packaging out of here just to make life a bit easier, but the first thing we want to find is our instructions, and have a look at those perhaps before you start the assembly process. They're very step by step, and what we're going to do in this video and when you assemble it at home is just go one page at a time through the instructions. So the first thing you'll notice is on the very first page of your instructions, you actually get a list of all the main components, and you can then check off the components against the list to make sure you've got everything at that point. If there is anything that you can't find, then give us a ring and we'll sort that out for you. So what have we got in this box? Well, we've got various bits and pieces. We've got components for the ends. These are all aluminium, and these are going to be what we make up first because we're going to make the ends of the frame first of all. So we've got those. We've got a very important pack of nuts and bolts there. We're going to be using those. We've got some plastic handles. We're not going to use these yet because they're for putting onto the glass to help us to slide the glass. This pack is for the shelves. We've got some adjustable shelves in the half grow house, so we'll put that to one side as well. We don't need that at the moment. These little coils are tape for putting in the runners so that the glass slides smoothly. So again, we don't need those yet. And then the last thing in this box is the end triangles, or the end plates that finish the end off. So they've got a white coating on there, so we'll have to peel that off before we make a start actually assembling it. So that's the components of the parts box. You're also going to have the longer rail pack that you'll need to strip down and check before you can actually start assembling. But we're going to start now by looking at the first section of the instructions and assembling that up. So we're just going to assemble the ends of the frames, which is the first page of the instructions. And we've got a little diagram on the instruction sheet telling us what components to get out. So I've got those out already. There's the 2 what we call the front legs, 2 top legs. These are all drawn up so you can identify what they look like and pull them out. We've got what we call the end kicks, 2 end kicks, and then we've got 2 back legs as well. And then the sheet says we also need for each end 4 nuts and 4 bolts. So I've pulled those out of the bag and just put the bag to one side. So we're going to assemble one end at a time. So we need 1 of each of these components. And then we've got some 3-dimensional drawings here that show us how it goes together. So this is the back leg. I'm going to put that on first, and the only thing to make sure with that is that the smooth face is facing into the frame. And we've got the front leg there, and it tells us that the top leg just slots in to the front leg. And looking at the drawing, we put that there like that. Now, the thing you note at the moment is the fitting here is just resting once against the other. There's no bolts at this stage to hold that in. That will come later. And then the rail at the bottom just goes across there according to the drawing. We don't need to worry too much about squaring it all up at this stage. We'll do that a little bit later. So that's all we need to do, and then we just need to bolt that together. So we want a flat bladed screwdriver for that. Now these nuts and bolts, the nuts are quite chunky, and you don't need a spanner on the inside. You just hold them under the hole, and then with the screwdriver we just bolt them on. So we just do them fairly loosely at the moment, because we're going to just have to square the frame up. Now if you find that when you come to put the last one in, the hole's a bit obscured, then just slacken off the other ones just to re-square it up and allow the bolt to go in. So there we are, that's our 4 nuts and bolts. We've now got the shape of the end frame. So I say don't over tighten them, but they just want to just be reasonably tight just to allow us to work on it. So that's the first end. As I say, that's loose at the moment, but there's the first end of the frame. Obviously at this stage you do the other end as well, and then put that to one side, and then you can to move on to the next step. So we've assembled the 2 ends, and the next page on the instructions is adding the long rail. So again, we've got instructions as to which rails to pull out, and I've pulled out the 3 rails that we're going to add on, and it tells us the first rail that we're going to add on is this kick rail, 4-foot kick rail, which is going to go down at the bottom. Now at this stage you need a little bit of space, and if you've got a friend or a partner that can help you, that's good, but if you haven't, you can still do it just with one person. So we need 4 nuts and bolts, so we'll get those out. Now we have 2 sizes of nuts and bolts in this bag. We've got little short ones, and we've also got longer ones. Now, the longer ones we're going to need in a minute, but at the moment it's telling us that we need 4 10mm bolts for this first rail. So get the 4 10mm bolts. I just put the 10mm bolt and the 20mm bolt side by side so you can just see the difference, and I'll show you where we need the 20mm bolt in a minute. So I've got 4 bolts, and we also need 4 nuts before I reseal the bag. There we are, 4 nuts and 4 bolts. So if you're doing it on your own, the best thing to do is do it at an angle, because then you can rest this rail on your bench or on the ground. So we just put the 2 components together like that. If there's 2 of you, you can have the other person holding the other end, and you can do both ends at the same time. So again, through the nut, or through the bolt should I say, and then just need to tighten that up. Just use your screwdriver just to tighten that. Like anything, first one's always the most difficult. Once we've got that one in, then the actual structure will stay a bit more stable, and then you pop the other one in. just tighten that up again. Don't over tighten them, because we are going to have to square it up in a little while. And so if you do find that you come to tighten one up and the hole doesn't look particularly clear, just slacken off some of the other nuts and bolts just to give you a bit more flex or movement on the frame, and you can tighten it up. So we put that end on. Let's put that down. I'm just going to get the other end. And we can put this on. Now, because we haven't got the top ends on, there's a little bit of flex on these at the moment. The other thing you need to make sure is when you do put the ends on, that you put the right end on the right side. So you've got the end kick plate is facing outwards, not facing into the frame. It's fairly obvious. So again, these chunky nuts are really useful because you don't have to put a spanner under there. You can just pop them on with your finger and just get them going. Okay, that's the first rail, and it now tells us the second rail we want to put on is the back rail. So I'm just going to turn that round and then we'll put that on there as well. So the next rail to go on is the ridge rail that's going to go at the top of the frame when we've got it outside and assembled. So again, we need 4 10mm nuts and bolts, or 4 10mm bolts and some nuts, and that just goes on to the back rail and actually helps tie in those 2 rails that we looked at earlier. So again, with a 10mm nut and bolt, we just pull that through and bolt it on. And do the other end as well. So there's 2 nuts and bolts at each end. And once we've got this rail on, the whole structure is going to be a lot more stable, because this is actually tying it all together. So just do the front ones and I do the back ones. And the fourth one over this side, just tying that back rail on, and again just nip the nuts and bolts up just so that they're tight enough to hold the frame firm without being too tight, because as I said before, we're going to square up a little bit later. So there's the fourth one. So these 2 at the very back are about the only 2 of the actual bolts that aren't held in a channel. So you do just need to hold your fingers on those 2 back ones just to stop the nut spinning. Every other nut pretty much is held in a channel. So there we are. That's much sturdier now on the framework. So that's the back rail done, and now we're just going to move on and do the front rail, which is this rail here. and that's going to go across there like that. Now for this is where we need our 20mm bolts. Now I'm just going to pop that down a second. I haven't actually got the 20mm bolts out. So you want 2 of the 20mm bolts and then 2 of the nuts. So the nuts are just the same. And the reason that we've got longer bolts on this one is, you remember when we were at the very beginning, we slotted the top leg into the front leg, and there was a little tongue that held it there. So we're actually going through 3 bits of metal here instead of the usual 2. So that goes on there like that, and then the bolt will just go through, and then the nut on the inside. Now if you've got a friend to help you, then it's useful for them just to hold the other end just while you're getting this started. Just makes it a little bit less fiddly. There we are. And we just do the other end as well, and then we'll be able to see the shape of the frame. So we're assembling the grow house, or the half grow house. You'll notice that none of it's difficult, it's really just putting nuts and bolts in. But it's not the fastest thing, because obviously we've got quite a few nuts and bolts just to try and make it good and strong. The framework's got a 25-year guarantee on it, so these nuts and bolts have got to take this frame through summer and winter for years and years to come. So we need good strong bolts, and we want plenty of them. So there we are. So that's the main structure of the frame done. And if we were a lean-to version, then we could just put that straight against the wall. But we're going to be having the grow house, so we're going to put it back on in a few moments, so that it's a freestanding unit. So that's the framework so far. We'll now go on to the next section of the instructions. So the next page on our instructions is fitting the 2 end plates. Now the end plates tie the end gable together like so, and also hold the end glass inside it. So each end plate is made of aluminium, but it's got a film over the aluminium of plastic, so we need to peel those off before we actually fit the end plates. So we do that both sides, and then we also need to count out the nuts and bolts that we need. So it tells us here that we need, for each end, 3 nuts and 3 bolts, but we also need some little white spacers as well. So these are the 10mm nuts and bolts again. The 3 nuts. And then we also want 2 of these little white nylon spacers. Now I'll explain what they're for in a moment. So when we fit the end plate, you just put it like so, and we want to concentrate on this little hole here. And so we take one of our 10mm bolts and just pop it through, and then very loosely just put a nut on the other side and just tighten it up. So again, if you've got somebody who can give you just a bit of a hand just holding the end plate while you do this, makes life a bit easier, but it's fairly straightforward to do. And we want to just leave this really loosely bolted on, because we want plenty of flex to do the other 2. Now these other 2 holes here and here are going to sandwich the glass, so the glass is going to be trapped between the vertical leg and the end plate. So that's why we've got those little white nylon spacers that we looked at earlier. So if we do the back one first, what we do is we put the bolt through the end plate, and then before we feed that bolt through the leg, we put the white nylon spacer on. Now put the bolt through the leg so that we've got a little bit of a gap, which is going to stop the glass being pinched too tightly, and then put the nut on the back, and then tighten that up. Like so. When we've done that one, then we just do the front one as well. So just the same, we put the 10mm bolt through the hole but not through the leg, put the white nylon spacer onto the bolt and then push it through the leg, and then we get our nut on the other side, and we just tighten that up. Again, we don't want it too tight, just want to nip it up. Like so. That's the one end. We want to do the other end now, and then we're ready to go on to the next stage. So this is the point we got to at the end of the last section. So we've got the ends on, and if we got one of the lean-to versions, then there we've got the frame assembled as much as we need to, because this would go up against a wall. But if we've got the half grow house, then we need to put the back sections on as well. So I'm just going to turn this round, and then we're going to work on the back of the frame, and we're going to put a bottom rail down here so that the glass at the back can fit in, and we're going to put an infill piece up here as well. So the next thing we need to put on are the back rails, because the grow house has got glass at the back because it's a freestanding unit. So we've got the kick rail there, which is going to go across the base of the grow house, and we've just got to bolt that on. Now we need to use longer bolts here because the leg that we're bolting to, we haven't got the flat face now that we're bolting to, but we've got the U shape. So we have a longer bolt that goes all the way through the void, as it were, and then we use a standard nut on the inside, and we can just hand tighten that to start off with, and then we can then tighten that with a screwdriver. Best thing to do is to hand tighten all 4 bolts to this end and then 2 at the far end, and then use the screwdriver to nip it up. Again, don't over tighten it because we're going to do the squaring a little bit later. So there we are, we've done this end, we'll just do the other end, and then that bottom rail will be done. Okay, well we've got the infill plate here, and we're just going to fit this little glass bracket onto the infill plate before we put the infill plate on the frame. Now the little glass bracket holds the 2 sheets of glass when they overlap at the back. So what we're going to do is put the infill plate flat on its back with the lip facing upwards, and then the first thing we want to do is just lift it up and just pop those 2 bolts through the hole so they're pointing upwards towards us. Just hold those and put them flat again so that it's flat in front of us, and then we need to put these 2 little white nylon spacers on, and they just give us a little bit of gap before we put the actual glass bracket on there. So we just drop that on, and then just put the 2 nuts on, and then when we pop the 2 nuts on, we just want to tighten those 2 nuts up just very little with the screwdriver, not too much because we're going to have to slide the glass beneath. And then when we've done that, we can then put the infill plate on the back of the frame. So we just need to bolt the infill plate onto the framework now. So I've just dropped it over the lip that's on the top rail there, and then we're just going to bolt it in 2 places, 1 bolt at each end. So we use the longer bolts that we were using earlier, and we just push that through the infill plate, but just don't put it through the frame at this point because we've got to put some spacers on. So we're going to put the larger spacer onto the bolt, and then we're going to put one of the small 3mm spacers onto the bolt as well, and then we pass it through the hole that's in the back leg. So just line that up, and then we just use one of our standard nuts on the inside just to tighten it up. Just going to do it hand tight at the moment because we haven't done the squaring, and also we're going to have to slide some glass in there, so we don't want it too tight at the moment. But once we've done both ends of the infill plate, then in actual fact we've assembled all of the half grow house. All we need to do now is assemble the shelves, and then we can take it outside and we can glaze the half grow house. So we just need to square the grow house up, and the best thing to do is use a sheet of glass for that, because we know that the sheet of glass is square. So when we assembled it all, we didn't tighten the nuts and bolts up. So what we're going to do now is just bring this sheet of glass to the end, and then we're going to see how square the leg is compared to the sheet of glass. So I've got it level with the end leg at the bottom, and you'll see at the top there's a little bit of leg showing. So I'm just going to push the frame itself so that the leg aligns all the way down with the sheet of glass, and then we can just nip up that bolt there. Now you can square it in 3 directions. You can use the sheet of glass in the front, you can take that sheet of glass out and put it in the roof, and just make sure then that the sort of footprint of the grow house is a rectangle rather than, say, a trapezoid shape. And you can also take the sheet of glass and put it up to the end as well, and just make sure that that is all nice and square. Once you've got it squared with the sheet of glass, you can take the sheet of glass out again, tighten all your nuts and bolts as tight as you can. Use a good size flat bladed screwdriver for that, and then the framework is ready to go. So we're going to assemble the shelf sets now. So there's 2 shelves in the half grow house, a wider seed tray shelf and a narrower seed tray shelf. So you will have got with the kit some shelf rods and also a pack of parts. So if we just open up the parts pack, we shall see what's inside. So we've got 4 of these stainless steel wires, and they're going to be for suspending the shelves. And then we've got 2 sets of 2 of these pieces. So these are to put the shelf rods onto. So this is the wider shelf. We're going to have 3 holes, so we've got 3 rods coming off there, and then we've got the narrower shelf that's got 2 holes, because that's going to have 2 rods on it. And then we've also got some screws, and we've also got some raw plugs as well. So we're going to assemble the shelf together, and you're going to need a hammer and also a Phillips type screwdriver as well to screw the screws in. So the first thing we want to do with the shelf rods is to put the little orange inserts into the end of the tube. So we do that with a hammer, and just pop the orange insert in, and then with a hammer just lightly tap it in. That's all you need to do. Do one end, turn it over, and do the other end. And you do that for all of the rods, and that will now accept the screws to make up the shelf. So once we've got the plugs in the end of the tubes, we can start assembling the shelf. And we're going to assemble the 2-rod narrow shelf to start off with. So we take one of our rods, and then we take the end piece for the shelf. You see it's got 2 holes in there. We're just going to put the the one that's nearest the cutout on first, because that's going to go at the back, and the other rod is going to have something else on it as well. So just put the screw in, and then just with a Phillips type screwdriver, just screw that in. Doesn't need to be too tight. It's fairly easy to do. If you've got a cordless screwdriver, you can use a cordless screwdriver. So we just put that on there, and then the next rod is going to go on the front one, but before we put that on, we just need to put the hook on as well. So put the hook on, and then just put that screw in as well. Now at this stage, it doesn't matter which way around you put that hook, which way it's pointing, but when you do the other end, make sure both ends or both hooks are pointing in the same direction. Now actually, because the hooks actually just slide on the rail, you can, if you want to, put them both on at the same time. So we've got the first part of our shelf there, and then obviously we can just do the other end. If you just move these out of the way, we can put this on, and again with the screws just put those in. So you put the back one on first, screw that in, and then the front one, again we need to slide the hook on, and we just need to make sure it's on the same way as the other end. Put that on, put our screw in, and we tighten that up, and then we're all done with our narrow shelf. The wider shelf is constructed in exactly the same way, except on the wider shelf, because it's taking the seed trays the other way, we've got 3 rods rather than the 2. So that's our shelf. We can go and hook that into the frame now. So the black liner that just goes into the front rail here, just literally slots in. It's about the same width as the channel. So if you just drop it in and push it against the back of the channel, and then with a screwdriver just make it flat onto the base. It is important to make sure that the channel liner does sit flat in the channel. If it doesn't sit flat in the channel, then it means that effectively the width of the channel is reduced, and that means it's going to be more difficult to slide the glass. So we're just running along with our screwdriver, just making sure that's nice and flat in there. And we just work our way along. It's quite straightforward till we've done the whole of the front run. Now we don't need to do the ends with the liner, because they're going to not be sliding ends, and we don't need to do the back either, because the back isn't a sliding end. So I've got it all the way down there now. I've made sure it's nice and flat with the screwdriver, and now we're ready to move on to the top glass. So the white tape is used for the roof glass. So the roof glass is going to be resting here, and the weight of the roof glass is going to be resting against this front rail here. So this is where we want the white tape to be between the aluminium and the glass. So we're going to install this in a vertical position on the inside of this rail. But to do that, we need to use some of these little sticky pads just to keep the white tape in place until the glass is in the frame. Once the glass is in the frame, the weight of the glass will keep the white tape in position. So put some little sticky pads on the back of the tape. I've cut it to length, so it's the right length, and then we're just going to just put it in there and stick it down. So to hold the white tape in place, we need to use some of these sticky pads just to stick onto the back of the white tape, so it'll adhere to the aluminium of the frame. So with the little strip of sticky pads that you have, the first one is always the hardest to get off, so you need to just bend it back on itself and then peel the first one off, making sure that you actually get the tape off and not just the carrier. Once you've got that first one off, then you can use that, and then the next one is quite easy because you can just peel away the backing piece to get the next one off. So first one's always hardest, and then once you've done the first one, the rest are easier. So once you've got the tape, then obviously with the first one, just stick it on, leave the carrier on for now because we'll remove that when we actually stick it onto the frame, and now we can just peel down, take the next one off and put that on further down. You don't need to put many on because it's only really holding it in place until the glass is resting on it. So those are the sticky pads for the Easy Glide tape. So we've got our sticky pads on the white tape, so we just need to peel off the backing piece on there, and we're just going to stick this onto the inside face of the rail. Just stick it on and then move along and just take off the next sticky pad and just pull it tight as you come along so there's no ridges in there, and just work your way along down the inside, and that's going to provide a nice smooth running layer for the glass to slide on. So once we put the channel liner in, we just want to wax the runners that the top glass rests on. So there's one at the front and there's a runner at the back as well. The top glass is a little bit different to the front glass in that, as well as resting its weight on the white channel line that we just put in here, it also rests some weight on these two runners, the one at the front and the one at the back. So to make those slide smoothly, because the glass is going to be in contact with the aluminium here, we just get an old wax candle or an old bit of wax and just rub the channel. Put plenty of wax on it, and we want to do this periodically through the year, certainly at the start of the season, just to make the roof glass slide more smoothly. Once we put the wax on there, we can, if we want to, actually just rub the channel liner as well. That makes it go really smoothly in there, and that just makes the roof glass slide much more easily. So front channel and also the back channel. So before we glaze the half grow house, we just need to put the handles on to allow us to slide the glass. Now there are handles for the front, and there is a single handle to help us slide the roof as well. Now the front handles are slightly shorter, and the roof handle, because we don't want any rain to come in, has to be longer, so it's the full length of the sheet of glass. So we're going to just put those on. The way of fitting them is the same, whether it's a short one or a long one. So with the short handles, if we take the sheet of glass and just have it on its edge, then the first thing we need is some water and a cloth. So we just want to dip the cloth in the water and then just wet the glass itself. Now we're doing that to make the handles slide on. The handle's got a very grippy piece of plastic on the inside that grips onto the glass, but if we try and push it on dry, then we're in danger of damaging that. So we just make it wet and then we push the handle on. We want to be about 100 mil from the top, although with the shorter handle it doesn't really matter quite where we put it. So that's the handle on there. Now we have to wait for it to dry so that the moisture underneath the grippy plastic dries out before we try and lift it by the handle, otherwise it will obviously come off. But once it's dry under there, then that will provide lots of grip to allow us to slide the handles back and forth. So that's the short one. We'll just go on and do the longer one as well now. So for our longer handle, we follow exactly the same procedure. We wet the glass first of all, and then we slide the handle on. So we're just going to wet along the edge there. Now with the long handle, we need to start about 15 millimeters from the top edge of the glass, because that's going to go up into the top channel and hold the sheet of glass in place. So we don't want to go right to the very edge, but about 15 mil down. You don't need to get a tape measure on it. You notice when you push it on, you just start off at the top and then work your way down the handle, and you'll hear it click on, and once it's clicked on, that's nice and secure. Again, we've got to wait for the glass to dry before we start putting any strain on that handle to allow us to have plenty of grip on there. So So we've got our grow house in place, and we're now ready to glaze the grow house. But before we do that, we're just going to put the shelves in, because it's a little bit easier putting the shelves in without the glass in than it is with the glass in, although you can change them around and adjust them when it's fully glazed. So we've got two sea tray shelves with this half grow house, and we've got a narrow one and a deep one, and we're going to just put the narrow one in at the top. We could put it either way, but we're going to put the narrow one in at the top, and we're just going to use the very top hole that we've got available on the back. So you hook the stainless steel hooks in, and then you just fold the shelf up and then put the slots in the very next hole down, and that gives you the top shelf, and then the bottom shelf exactly the same way. Just get the two stainless steel wires, so I've got one each end, and I'll just hook that in. So again, pick a hole, make sure you pick the same hole both sides. Obviously it does help if you can see the holes. There we are. And we just hook that one in as well. So I've left one hole spare, and then I'll put this next one in. It's quite high actually. I'm going to go down one slot or one hole on there, and then up to the next hole down and lock it in, and that's the two shelves in place. Obviously we can take them out if we want to in the summertime, or we can change them around so that the larger shelf is at the top and the narrower shelf is at the bottom. That's quite useful later on in the season when we've perhaps got big pots or say tomatoes in the half grow house. Then the narrow shelf isn't taking up so much room down at the bottom. So that's the shelves. We now need to move on to the glass itself, and we're going to glaze the ends first of all, and then we're going to do the back. So we're going to glaze the end glass first of all. So the first thing we need to do is, with a screwdriver, just slacken off the two lower screws that we have on the end plate. Those were the two that, when we assembled it, if you remember, they had those white nylon spacers behind, and those are the two screws that hold the sheet of glass in place. So once we've slackened those two screws off, we get our sheet of glass and we just slide it in from the front. So if you just rest it down on the very bottom rail and then slide it between the end plate and the frame itself, and just slowly slide it in. You might want to just lift it up so it doesn't judder along the kick rail, and then when we get to the back, just ease it past the back leg so it's nicely in position, and then just with our screwdriver all we do is just nip it up again. You don't want to over tighten it, because if you over tighten it, what will happen is the glass at the bottom will push out, and we want to make sure that the glass at the bottom of the channel is nice and tight up against the frame to stop any drafts coming in. So just nip it up, and that's the end sheets of glass done. Now once we've done the end glass, we can then move on to the back glass. That's done in exactly the same way. First of all, we slacken off the two bolts that hold the infill panel onto the frame, and then we slide the glass in one sheet from each end. So again, we put it into rest it on the channel at the bottom, and then just slide it behind the infill panel so that it's sandwiched between the infill panel and the leg. And we slide it in, and then we slide it behind the glass plate that's in the center there. And when we slide the other sheet of glass in from the other end, we will just have both sheets of glass sandwiched behind the end glass plate and held in by the infill panel. So that's the end glass done, and that's the back glass done. Again, with the back, we would just nip up those screws that we've slackened off once we've got the glass in there. So the next thing to glaze is the front of the half grow house, and if you remember, we put two shorter handles on the front glass. So we've got those sheets here with their shorter handles, and so we're just going to put those into the frame one sheet at a time. Now it's very straightforward putting the front glass in. We just push the glass up into the top channel, swing it forward so it's above the front channel, and then just drop it into position. And that's the first sheet of glass in there. We can slide it back and forth, and the second sheet of glass goes in exactly the same way to glaze the front of our frame. Just make sure it's in the bottom channel before you let go of it, and that's the front all glazed as well. So all we've got left to glaze now is the roof. That consists of two sheets, one that's got no handle on and then a sheet that's got a handle on. So we're going to put the sheet with no handle in first. And again, that just slots in up to the top, then down into the bottom channel, or the front channel. And then the sheet with the handle just fits on top of that, so you can slide that for easy access. Now if you want to open the other end, then the best way of doing it is just put your hand inside and you can slide that sheet of glass to access this side, but glass just slides back and forth, and that's the frame all glazed.